What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Beyond the Grave Media. Tonight, I want to do something different. I want to tell you a true story. I want to look directly into the camera, and I want to tell you one hell of a true story. I want to look directly into your ocular nerve out there in YouTube land, and I want to tell you a true story and a film that inspired this inspired is the wrong term, I think, out of respect for the dead. This is a killer crocodile film called Black Water, and actually what transpired is the film documents the nightmarish account of what happened to three friends and their little, foray into the Northern Territory in December of 2003. The film Black Water takes place in the Northern Territory of Australia in December of 2003, where we had three friends, Shaun Blowers, Ashley Mcgough, and Brett Mann, who were out riding quads or ATVs near the Finniss River. These were people that were local. They had hunted and fished and rode quads through this area many times. I forget the actual term. If you're from Australia, don't murder me. But I don't know if this is south or north of Darwin, but that's kind of the big landmark there. And this river kind of snakes back with these mangrove trees. And so this trio of friends, they were out riding, and it was December, and in that area, apparently it gets really, really hot, and there was flooding, and there was monsoons, and there was really, really high river waters and tides, and they were being pelted by hail and all kinds of stuff. And while they were out riding, they must have gotten pretty warm, and they decided to pull off to this spot, this little grove in the mangroves here, where they could take some shelter and get some swimming and cool down. This was a spot that apparently they'd swim before, but there was no, swimming signs. This was not a locally known spot to be swimming out here in Australia. So as they went down to cool off, they didn't really notice that the tide had been rising because of the local flooding. Going out a little bit further than their friends was Brett Mann here, and he was swept out to the rising tide. As he kind of stepped into the water, he went down a little farther, and they thought he was just kind of taken out, just went off a little river shelf, right, and just went out into the deep water. But what he didn't know, and neither did his friends, that waiting in the reeds was a prehistoric beast known to inhabit these parts, known as the saltwater crocodile, the biggest and most aggressive crocodile in the world, this species here. 13 feet of them. In a frantic hurry, Brett was attacked by the shoulders by this large salty as his two friends narrowly escaped into the nearby mangrove trees that lined the bank. When the croc surfaced a few minutes later, to their screaming and their horror, Brett's body did as well for the last time, sadly in its massive jaws. This large croc proceeded to stalk this riverbank for the next 22 painstakingly painful hours. 22 hours. This crocodile hung around this rising tide while his two friends were staked out in this mangrove tree, not being able to hear, being pelted by rain and storms as the water rises slowly. They can't tell if this thing is down there snacking. It's got a little breeding ground. If there's more of them, they just knew that they could see the crocodile through the lightning flashes. Frightening. Truly fucking frightening. Now, sadly, Brett's body was never found. This tale sets the stage for the 2007 Australian independent horror film Black Water. Now, this film, it does have some authenticity to it, and it isn't completely disrespectful of the dead. But the names and the characters and the events are quite a bit different. What transpired and what goes down is a lot different than the origin story. I guess that's the difference when you think of based on a true story and then the other term based on true events. I guess that gives you a lot more freedom and leeway to kind of Hollywood and bastardize the story a little bit to try to get butts in the seats. What really happened, though, is pretty damn frightening, and I don't really think we need all the stuff that happened in this film, but let me give you the plot. In the film Black Water, there is a group of three people, a couple and a sister, who decide, they want to hunt for some fun. They want to go on a little adventure during the December holiday season, and they're hoping to see some real world saltwater crocodiles. That's what they want to see. They got their camera and they go out searching for them, right? And of course, you probably heard this story before. Things go horribly wrong as they go down this fishing expedition. They try to find a tour guide who unfortunately is already out on a tour. So they kind of take up the next backup Barry, right? Backup Barry, and he's got a gun, he's got an oar, and he thinks he can capture some fish and show them some crocodiles. So off we go for some, deep water river fishing and some fun. December, fun. Northern Territory, Australia. That doesn't really go together, but then again, I'm not from there. The little boat they're fishing from snakes down the river, deep into these mangroves, right? Similar to the original origin story. And it's pretty intense. They're out there fishing, they're getting bumps, they're getting lures, they're not sure what's happening. They hear this pow, and they're like, oh my God, that's got to be a crocodile. It's underneath, and it's pretty tense as the film is showing you this. Ends up being just kind of a paint can, right? And so they snake down the river a little bit further, right? The three friends, they're in peril down here in the Northern Territory. They end up being attacked in the water. Their boat ends up flipping over, and what happens is perilous and extremely tense. For what it's worth, this isn't a big studio blow up, right? There isn't a bunch of Hollywood magic and some CGI with some crazy looking alligator or crocodile, right? Something that's totally unbelievable. That's not what happens in this film. All the effects in this film are practical. All the crocs that you see in this film are real, for the most part. At least that's what they've said. And that's what's truly terrifying. If you know the story and you think about what really happened, the crew is bringing in real world saltwater giant fucking crocodilians to this Australian river where they're, who knows if they actually inhabit there, right? Giant fucking dinosaurs are being introduced to the general public. I don't think they have an equivalent to Bart the bear, right? The killer grizzly bear from the Great Outdoors, right? The bald-headed killer bear of Clare County, and then also the giant grizzly bear in The Edge. That bear was actually trained. It's still the grizzly bear though, right? What if he doesn't want honey that day and he just decides, yeah, that's fucking it. Nope, you're done. In fact, there are some parts of this film, it's not perfect. This film can be a little bit of a drag to get through. This film feels like a real world movie because it's based on real world events, based on true events, right? Like we talked about. What happens though, it's a real damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation where the pair, actually there's three of them because the tour guide, spoiler, is eaten, right? And his body's taken down. And so the three of them are trapped in these mangrove trees. And what they can't see is they can't see what's under the water because a foot in front of you, everything is gone. So they know that there's a killer croc hunting. They've already lost a tour guide. Their boat is really close by, maybe 5 yards, 15 feet. But in that 15 feet, they know there's a dead body and a killer croc down there. A giant 13-foot saltwater crocodile. The boat, can they flip it over? Can they get in it? Because it's already flipped them once when they had an extra person, so that's not a good idea. But then if they stay in the trees, they could starve to death, dehydration, right? It looked like it's really damn hot here. Who knows if there's snakes or there's spiders? I don't know. It's Australia. Anything could happen. So you either starve to death or you take your chances in the water with this crocodile. The water in many of these rivers in Australia, though, are known to have these tea trees, right? And these other big trees that leak into the water and make the water so black you can't even see. Once you go underwater, a foot in front of you, you completely disappear. That is something to think about that is truly frightening. You go underwater, you look for your arm, and you can't see it. That's how black this water is. Imagine how many people just don't come out, right? Or they come out missing an appendage. And that's probably not from a crocodile. That's probably from something like a bull shark or a box jellyfish or those other giant fish that they have down there that attack. This is a real problem, and I can't believe that people would swim in waters like this. That's what's just so crazy. You have a literal apex predator, the top of the food chain, right? It has no other predators besides cannibalistic saltwater crocodiles. That's the only thing that can threaten it. So all you really have to do is stay out of its natural habitat. Crocs are known to sit and study. They just sit and they study the banks and they track and they observe wildlife and they look for patterns of the river. They're very opportunistic, aggressive killers, right? They don't need to be fast because their tail can propel them like 15 feet in just a couple little swishes. They have extremely powerful jaws, like 3,000 psi, so they don't really need to do anything but grab you, take you down, and drown you in the deep water, swallow you whole. And if you can fight back, they're just going to rip you apart, right? Just barrel roll you to death. Death roll, horrifying. Wrong place, wrong time, and that was it. You aren't getting away from this thing. Most individuals who were attacked by this 1-ton reptile, yeah, they're just drugged down to the deep water and they're never seen again. That's what happened to their friend. That's what happened to the friend in the true story, and that's what happened to someone in this other film here, Blackwater. Blackwater as a film, it's a little bit silly in some spots, right? It's kind of like a film, it's kind of like a version of the eco-horror of Frozen from 2010, you know, where they're like stuck on that chairlift, and it's like you either sit up there in the snow, stuck to this chairlift, and you freeze to death, or you fall down, could break your leg, or be eaten by wolves. What are you going to choose? That's a similar situation here with the mangrove trees and this crocodile. Of course, what happens is one of the victims is attacked, right? Actually, a couple of them are attacked and another one bleeds out. Another thing happens to the guy. And then the woman who decides that she's going to go ahead and save her sister is attacked, and all of a sudden she kind of comes to in this little, I don't know if it's, kind of like the den or whatever, or kind of like the kill spot where the crocodile drags its victims. But of course, she finds the tour guide, and there's some great gore in this scene, some great gore, where you're missing a head, you're missing the limbs, the crocodile's already fed on this guy quite a bit. And of course, the tour guide has a .357 snub nose, right? I don't know if it's a Magnum. I don't think it's a Magnum. But we get into a firefight on the swamp banks here, and a major change from the original story, but it becomes kind of a survival thriller, and instead of just a horrific survival tale where you lose one of your best friends. Crazy story. Without the movie, it really didn't need to be changed at all. I can't imagine that 2003 attack and living through that. Imagine that desperate battle of survival when the massive monsoon strikes and you can't see in front of you, you can't hear because of the pounding rain, and you can't see that far down to know if there's a crocodile waiting to eat you. Is the water rising? You can't tell because of the water that's coming down in the storm. So you're either going to be eaten alive by the crocodile, or you could just freeze to death or die. It's a crazy story. We didn't really need this tour guide and the boat flipping over, and it makes for a good film, but it didn't really need to be changed. I can't even imagine going head to head with a killer croc. That 22 hours after their friend was killed alive and then eaten has got to be the worst day of your life, and to just relive that through Hollywood magic has got to just suck. I've read some stories where these guys, they still work in Australia, and some of them, they clean pools and stuff, and they have tour guides and things, and they always ask the people that are coming to visit to make sure they don't have any inflatable crocodiles in the water before they come out and clean pools. I just can't even imagine that. Traumatic, extremely traumatic. Stalked by a 13-foot killer crocodile.